in the writing process is to generate ideas, come up with a lot of ideas. I always say it's kind of like a shoe store. If you go in a shoe store and you walk in and you don't think about what kind of shoes you need or how much money you have or what size you wear, and you just walk in a shoe store and you grab the first pair of shoes that you think looks cool and you walk out of that shoe store, do you think that's going to be a very good fit for you? They're not even your size, and you don't even know if you want those shoes, and you haven't really thought about what you want to write it for. So the very first thing I always say to kids is, and I've said this to you guys before, we don't do so what writing. No way. We always think about what we want to write and why we want to write it. And we try on a bunch of pairs of shoes or try on a bunch of ideas before we get writing. So today, let me tell you a little bit about why you're writing a narrative story.
I don't know what they're saying.
Clara, are you there? I can still hear you, honey. Okay. So a narrative story is a story that tells something about your life, but it's not just a so what story. It should tell about a time in your life. Like, think about the stories that you like to read.
Miss Laws, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Because I can hear you.
Can you hear me, Clara?
I can't hear you. Can you type it in chat?
I'm gonna double check and make sure her
Clara,
volume.
honey, Clara, I'm gonna record it so you can watch it later, okay? Just tell her that in chat that we're gonna record it and watch it later. Okay, so here's the thing about this story. When you write a story, would you like to read a story that goes like this? I got up in the morning and I had a really fun trip to the beach, and I got in the car and I drove to the beach and I ate some noodles, and then I went and walked on the beach, and then I saw my dog, and then my mom said, come here, and then we went over to the store, and then we got back in the car, and then we drove home, and then I had pizza for dinner, and then I went to bed. How many of you think that's a great story? No, please no. I call that a bed to bed story. It just tells what you did, and it's kind of like a so what story. It doesn't really teach you anything, and there's no reason to read it. So the first thing you have to think to yourself is, what kind of stories do I like to read? Stories that are interesting, stories that are scary, stories that teach me something, stories that are sad. And that's the kind of story that you should write. And so when you're thinking of an idea for a story, most kids are like, I want to write a really exciting story. Well, I have to tell you that sometimes exciting stories are good, but there's an awful lot of great stories. I'm going to read one to you on Thursday. It's really about nothing. It's called 11, and it's about a little girl sitting in her school and being super embarrassed, a time when she was super embarrassed. Which brings me to my first topic. Sometimes the best stories are the stories with the most emotion, where you felt strong emotions. So what I would like you to do in your notebook is I would like you to make a T chart. So everybody right now is going to make what I call a T chart, like this. And at the top of that T chart, you're going to write strong emotions. Okay? Strong emotions. Someone needs to mute. Okay. Thank you. Strong emotions. And now you're going to think about times when you felt really strong emotions. I remember when I was a little girl, I felt really sad. And so this one, you're going to write the emotion over here. And the reason that I felt sad, the one time that I felt sad, so I want to write one time, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute. But the time that I felt really sad, the one time when I felt really sad was when my dog, Noelle, died. I felt so sad that night. So when my dog, Noelle, died, I'm going to write that over there. And then I might think of another time I felt really, really sad. I know that it's a lot of death here, but when my grandpa called to say that my grandmother died. I cried and cried that night.
Wait, what are we doing? I got kicked out.
So we are making a T chart, Adrienne, of
Okay.
strong emotions, and we're just trying to think of some good stories of times when we had really strong emotions, because they're going to be more interesting stories.
Okay.
So I made a T chart, and on one side I put the emotion. I started with sad. You can start with whatever you'd like. And I wrote down 2 times when I felt really sad: when my dog died, when my grandfather called to tell me that my grandmother had died. Kind of morbid. I felt really sad. Also, maybe disappointed is a better word. One Christmas when I didn't get the present I wanted.
Oh, that always stinks.
Appointed. I was disappointed at Christmas. I really wanted this music box with a ballerina that twirled around, and I didn't get it. So that was a time when I felt really disappointed. Another great emotion. So you guys should be doing the exact thing I'm doing, only you're writing down your own 1 times. And you can continue this later. So I would recommend you leave some space to add more later after I'm done. Another emotion, let's see. You guys unmute for a second and tell me some more emotions that you think are good, strong emotions. Go ahead, just say them.
Curious.
I hear anger, fear,
Excited.
excitement, and sometimes you feel all of them at once. Let's do fear. I've seen kids write amazing stories about fear, like a time they really wanted to go on a roller coaster and they were afraid, and they did the whole story waiting in line. Those are amazing stories. I love those roller coaster stories. Like all the thoughts that go through your head when you're waiting in line trying to go on a really scary ride. Or the first time they rode a bike when their parents let go of them. Anybody feel afraid then? First time you rode a bike? I've seen some amazing ones about crashes, like riding a bike down a hill and crashing. Those are some pretty good stories.
I did a story about that last year when I got my first bike.
Yeah, those are good stories. Another one that I've seen is it's kind of sad and it's kind of fear when people got into car accidents. I've
Yeah.
seen some amazing stories about car accidents. I've seen some really great brave stories about sad when parents got divorced, and like when the kids were sat down in the living room to be told about divorce. You might think, oh, I don't want to write about anything that personal. Your story will be private if you want it to be. If you don't, our plan is when we're done writing these stories at the end of this month, we're going to have a writer's celebration and we're going to share our stories. So you guys said like happy or excited. I have seen some amazing excited stories when people like got a puppy. The first time they met their puppy or went to pick out their puppy. Amazing stories about when a sibling was born and they went to the hospital to visit their sibling. Got a puppy or got a new brother or sister, a new baby. A lot of kids like to write about trips they've taken. The problem with those is they're too big of stories. So you need to pick a part of the trip that you really loved. So like a camping trip when you were super excited to like set up the tent. So you just pick one part of it and tell just that little part of the story. Because otherwise you're writing a novel and we don't have time for a novel today, even though some of you have already written novels, which is cool. Did you know that you are among authors here? Several of you have already got books going. All right, friends, today and every day when we're writing, we want to take the time to think about what we want to write and what we want to say. And we want to try on a lot of ideas. If I were in class with you, I would force you to sit here and start one of these stories. I'd say, pick a story. I'd say, okay, you're going to write as much as you can about that story for 5 minutes. And in fact, anybody who wants to stay on, we can try this. And after 5 minutes, I say, now you need to change. Pick a new story, write about it for 5 minutes. And then after 5 minutes, the bell would ring and I say, now we're going to change. And I would make you write a third story for 5 minutes. And what you're doing is trying out the stories to see how much you have to say about them and how easy they are to write. So I recommend you try on these stories today. Sit down and write just for 5 minutes about one, and then switch to another and switch to another, and just try on some stories. Now, I talked a little bit about not a bed to bed story. How many of you have heard the term seed story? Anybody hear that one? So if you think about a watermelon, if you tell me about your trip, make sure you, Emma, mute your screen, honey. If you write me a watermelon story, it's like, hey, last year I had the most fun trip. We went to Sun River and I'm going to tell you every single thing we did for 7 days. That's a watermelon story. It's too big. What I want is not even a piece of watermelon. I want the seed. I just want a tiny idea. So like I said, if you're writing about that trip to Sun River, ask yourself which day was the best day. And that maybe is the piece of watermelon. And then say, what particular thing I did that day was the best part? Like maybe it's when you rafted down the river and you had like a big water fight. Or maybe it was when you went out to dinner and your parents embarrassed you by singing happy birthday to you in front of everybody. Or, you know, you need to pick one little part of that story and just tell that part well. And you might think, oh, I don't know what I'm going to be able to write that much about them singing happy birthday to me. But I am telling you that I'm going to read you a story that's about 6 pages long, that's about a teacher putting a sweater on a kid's desk, and you are going to be totally into that story. It's an amazing story. Okay? So stories don't have to be about a lot if they're written well, which is what we want to learn to do. That's it for my lesson today. I'm going to have Gerard stay on with me. Everybody else, you guys can go.